Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, everyone, to the Ilm Feed podcast with your host, Shabbir Hassan. And really excited for today's podcast because we have with us everyone's favorite Scottish Azhari. And if you're wondering, okay, that's a bit of a crazy mix there. Well, yeah, we're gonna explore that today. He is an academic. He's the head of research over at Bayina Institute, and many of you may know him as the Tafsir Doctor, but we'll use his name, Sheikh Dr. Sohaib Saeed. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullah, Shabbir. Very pleased to be with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, very well.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Are you in Scotland right now?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
Not really able to go anywhere else at the moment, but
yeah, that's
where I
what
want to
I'm
be anyway.
thinking. That's what I'm thinking. Alhamdulillah. No, thank you for joining. I know we've been trying to organize this for some time, and obviously we wanted you to come down to the studio in London, but that wasn't possible. But I'm just glad that, of course, you're able to join us on this live stream. And yeah, I mean, you're not the first Scottish guest that we have. We've had, I think, maybe like one other. Like so it's very rare out of like 70 or so episodes. Like I don't think that's very good on our part, is it, Sheikh?
No, there's like 5 or 6 million of us here.
I know. It's not very and you're not the first Azhari either. We've had a couple, but alhamdulillah, you're the first, we could say, Scottish Azhari.
Maybe the first from Usul al-Din faculty of Azhar. I don't know. We need a first something.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. But no, really glad to have you on today. A lot of the discussions, there'll be a range of things, I guess. Perhaps we'll go into the whole discussions on Qur'an translation. And I actually forgot in my small little bookshelf behind me, I've got your book, and I forgot. I was supposed to. Sure, we'll try and organize that. But what I wanted to do before we actually begin is I actually wanted to do something a bit different, and it's something that I didn't actually give you a heads up on. So I don't know how you're going to be to do this, but I'm hoping it's going to be nice and fun and engaging and interactive for our viewers and listeners. And that is, Sheikh, look, we're going to, of course, talk about Qur'an translation shortly, but there's something that I think you even tweeted about it recently, which was like something about, when, because of course, social media, mashallah, we've got lots of active Muslim users, and a lot of people, they share verses from the Qur'an, right? Which is fine. It's good. Everybody does it with, noble intentions. But I think you mentioned something which was like, there's so many Quran translations out there in English. So why not at least just pick one of them when you're sharing a verse, rather than you basically just like making up your own translation and getting it completely wrong, right? Am I right in saying that you did tweet something?
Yeah, and it was in reference really to people sometimes wanted to make a certain point, and then they distort the ayah in order to make that point.
Yeah.
So that's unjustifiable in from every angle. But of course, there's no need to reinvent the wheel every time when people have reinvented it maybe over 100 times in English. Each ayah has been translated many times by people who probably, not all of them are equal in their quality and accuracy and so on, but at least each of them has somebody behind it who's really thought about how to translate the ayah and wasn't just trying to quickly tweet something out. So yeah, especially if somebody's not qualified to translate the Quran, and I was referring actually to somebody who was definitely not qualified at all, then they should simply copy and paste an existing translation, whichever one they happen to choose.
Yeah,
I think we'll probably get into that. How do we
we will.
Translations?
We definitely will. So what I'm thinking of doing is I've picked like a couple of verses from the Quran, right? That are widely shared on social media. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the verse, and I'm going to give you the way that everybody normally translates the verse, and then I want you to kind of give a rating as to how accurate that translation is. Okay. And also I'm going to give you kind of like the the normal interpretation of that people usually go for, and I want you to also give your thoughts on, is that accurate interpretation?
Right.
I know it's
No
a bit
pressure at all.
yeah, no pressure at all. But let's get into it. I'm gonna start with one that Muslim Twitter is not just Muslim Twitter. This is like a very common verse. It comes to marriage, right? Of course, we have to mention.
I know
marriage
exactly where you're going, Shabbir.
Okay, you know.
My love. Okay.
So this is verse number 8, Surah An-Naba, right? Which you'll find pretty much everywhere. وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. So let's start with the translation, which everybody translates it as, which is, and we created you in pairs. So that's translation, and the interpretation usually that people go for is, this is kind of like, the Qur'an's way of telling you that you have a soulmate, and your partner's already been chosen for you, and that was already written for you, and this is a verse that is to do with marriage. So basically the two questions on this first verse is, how accurate is that translation, and we created you in pairs, and is it to do with marriage, and what's your take on it?
Okay, so translation wise, there's no problem with that translation.
Okay.
We created you in pairs, or we created you as pairs. Or azwaj is actually the plural of zawj, which is itself a part of a pair, right? So a pair is actually zawjan or zawjain, right? So the zawj is something which has a counterpart, right? So can that apply to man and women, to marriage? Sure, it does. It's one of the meanings of the ayah. The ayah is actually much broader than that in the context of Surah An-Naba. It's not on the theme of marriage specifically, but we have created you of all different kinds and complementary kinds, different shapes and sizes, different ages. You have been created in all sorts of different ways, and in that there is a direction to, one of the things that we can take from this is that we should look out for each other, that we should support one another, that as a society, as a Muslim society and a society in general, we should try to complete each other, to fill in the gaps that others may have with support and solidarity. And one of the meanings, of course, is that's fulfilled through marriage. So as for the idea of soulmate and so on, I wouldn't take it from this ayah at all. But the basic premise that, yes, when you end up marrying somebody, that was actually the person that Allah destined you to be with. You can't really question it on that theological level.
Yeah.
But was that the only person that you could have considered? No, there could be other people that if you married them, they would be the right person for you. They're the one that Allah Azza wa Jal destined for you and are suitable for you. So yeah, that's slightly misused, but I don't want to hate on people as well, for using the ayah in a certain way, because it can apply to marriage. It's just clearly not about that. It's not really about the soulmate idea, and the soulmate idea could also slightly mislead people into thinking that out of a billion or so Muslims, there's only one person who is the right person for you. It's not as hard as that.
So we're not asking people to stop quoting it in their wedding invitations, then, are we?
Well, it's probably this more obvious ayah to put on the wedding invitation. Verse, was it 17 of Surah Al-Rum? Or is it 27? And from among his signs is that he created for you spouses from among yourselves and placed between
21,
you.
I think.
Mercy, yes, 21. Love and mercy, affection and mercy. This might be more obvious.
Yeah, makes sense. Brilliant. Okay, interesting stuff. I'm going to give you just maybe one more, depending on how much time we have. So there's another verse, I think it's 256 from Surah Al-Baqarah. La ikraha fi din. There is no compulsion in religion. That's the standard kind of translation that we see on social media. And the idea that people get from that verse is, well, you can't really force any Muslim to do anything if they don't feel like praying. You can't really force them. If they don't feel like fasting, you can't really force them. So is that the correct application of the verse in terms of Muslims and so on? Yeah.
Well, okay. So about the translation, either you're going to see it as a statement, or translate it as a statement, or as an instruction, or like a prohibition, that there should be no compulsion in religion. There is to be no compulsion in religion. So both of those are valid translation strategies. In terms of meaning, the direct meaning of it actually is to do with entering into the faith. So no one is to be compelled or forced to confess the faith or to become a Muslim if they don't have the conviction to do so. Because قد تبين الرشد من الغي, because clear guidance has been made clear and distinct from misguidance. So as such, that it's not something that can really be abrogated and cancelled out, as some people allege that this verse was cancelled by later revelations and now there is compulsion in religion. No, on this basic meaning, there can never be compulsion in religion, because that is explained by this principle. Truth is distinct from error. Then, of course, there are some situations where, in all situations, you have to encourage each other, right? And especially if you have some influence or authority over someone, that you encourage them and push them in the right direction. But ultimately, everything in faith has to come from the heart and from conviction, even prayer and so on. There's a question that can be raised with regards to a Muslim authority. To what extent do they impose certain basic premises of a Muslim society upon their populations as a whole, not upon each person as an individual, but ensuring that the prayer is being maintained and so on. So those are things that scholars have always understood are not ruled out by this verse. Okay, but obviously compelling populations to become Muslim would be excluded by this ayah.
Okay, interesting. Is it kind of similar to, like, how I think it's in Surah Maryam when Allah speaks about Prophet Ismail alayhi salam, he says, وَكَانَ يَأْمُرُ أَهْلَهُ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ, like, and we kind of take the meaning of amr here, like he commanded his family to pray, right? Is it kind of like that? Like, it doesn't mean that he was forcing in that sense, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, it's not also like, if you want, so amr bil ma'ruf, nahi anil munkar, that's the concepts, right? Commanding the good, forbidding the right, forbidding the wrong, obviously. So it can be strong, but ultimately, faith, or we are going to be accounted for what we do willingly, because we're going to be accounted for our actions with their intentions. If your intention is purely out of fear of some authority, or because in order to please somebody who's putting pressure on you, or to get them off your back, it's not going to help you in the day of judgment. So why would we be the one to force someone in that way? Your job is to instill conviction and love in that person's heart for faith and for good actions. Otherwise, you yourself are not creating anything useful if forcing someone to adhere to things externally.
Interesting stuff. Okay, cool. Well, I want to. There was a few other verses, but you know what? We'll just leave it at leave it there for now. Thank you for that, because we want to get into the main part of today's discussions, which is off the back of what we've just gone through there, Quran translations and trying to make Quran translations a bit more accurate and so on. Actually, let's start with your publication, which was on Imam Razi's Tafsir. You put out the first volume. It was translated, and like I said, the copy is there somewhere, which is you've got it as well,
because I saw yours is far away.
Excellent. So it's a Tafsir al-Kabir by Imam Razi. That's one of the names that it goes by, which literally is the Great Exegesis. So how many volumes do you usually find that Tafsir in when you look at the original? How many would that be?
Insofar as this volume 1 is volume 1, there are 32 volumes.
Right, 32 volumes.
Which is sometimes
is that one of the biggest, then, you would say, out of the?
It is among the biggest, because Imam al-Razi would go into more depth and go into some tangents as well, which people have sometimes said some quite derisory remarks about the tangents of Imam al-Razi. Famously, people have said فيه كل شيء إلا التفسير, that there's everything in there except for tafsir. And then others have attempted to defend it by saying فيه كل شيء مع التفسير. It's got everything in there along with tafsir. But I think a lot of what is being called كل شيء, is actually tafsir as well, or can be seen within a broader conception of what tafsir is. because tafsir is everything that is there to clarify the meanings of the Quran, and connecting the meanings of the Quran to could be philosophical ideas, could be scientific phenomena and theories. It could be all sorts of different things. If it helps you on some level to appreciate the meaning of the ayah, then it would still count as tafsir. Otherwise, it's supplementary material alongside tafsir. So yeah, it's one of the biggest, certainly of its time. But certain other tafsirs are big for other reasons, like Imam al-Tabari's tafsir is big because of the number of narrations that it contains, along with Imam al-Tabari's own observations about the ayah, his conclusions, his discussions, to the extent that a lot of people, when they look at Tafsir al-Tabari, think that it really is just narrations, because they almost lost sight of the bits before the narrations and after the narrations. Imam al-Razi is not heavy on narrations. He does bring them, he does use them, but he's got a different structure where he, under each ayah, or maybe sometimes a little section of the ayah, he will say, and here we have some inquiries, masail. So he'll go through that. And others have followed a similar pattern, like Imam al-Qurtubi, where they just take one sort of aspect at a time and they say, well, let's discuss it, maybe the linguistic aspect of it, maybe the qira'at of it, the fiqhi aspects of what is connected to this verse, a philosophical problem that arises, a debate with the Mu'tazila over this ayah. Does it pertain to predestination or does it pertain to free will? So lots of different angles, which help you as a reader to realize that, okay, there's a lot of different things that you can ask when you come to a Quranic ayah. It's not just a case of, as has become sort of the norm nowadays, to think that tafsir is something that is pre-packaged and done and dusted, where somebody has already told us what it means. So all we have to do is pass on, right, as what's often called tafsir bil ma'thur, right? So we transmit the meaning of the ayah. Of course, you can transmit, but the point is you're transmitting somebody who has said something about the ayah based on either revelation, if the Prophet ﷺ has told us something, or his companions are relating something from him that came from revelation, or it is something that they derived with their own reasoning. We say ra'i, tafsir bil ra'i, like tafsir by opinion, but then you sort of make it sound bad, as soon as you call it opinion, but it just means their educated opinion, right? You see the difference? Tafsir bil ra'i, if it's educated opinion, if it's somebody who has a basis to say what they say about the Quran, then we take that seriously. It still has to be weighed in the scales of Quran and Sunnah, and in terms of reasoning and all other things, it has to be weighed by. So that's why Imam al-Razi's tafsir is often, has been in modern times, has been classified as, praiseworthy opinion. Some of the scholars have categorized it in that way. In reality, it's kind of an encyclopedia of tafsir, an early kind of encyclopedia of tafsir, and then later tafsirs have incorporated what Imam al-Razi talked about. He became one of the very important scholars and exegetes in our whole tradition. So later mufassirs made use of what he said, engaged with what he said, argued with what he said, but no doubt he is central to our tradition. So it was a great honor when I was asked to translate first of all volume 1 of Tafsir al-Razi, and now just completing work on a second volume, which is actually a compilation volume of several surahs.
Nice.
So that one includes Surah Yusuf, Surah Al-Kahf, and several others. So there in the other surahs, we get a bit more of the standard approach to tafsir, which is verse by verse. Volume 1 is very rich in what we call the tangents, or introductory materials that reflect on different aspects of studying the Quran, and it contains within it the direct tafsir of the ayat of the Fatiha as well. But volume 1 is just around Surah Al-Fatiha. That's what sometimes people get quite amazed by.
I know.
Some 500 pages of of nothing except for Surah Al-Fatiha and the things that are somehow connected to it.
It is amazing because that's what everybody says. It's like one entire volume on what, 7 verses from Al-Fatiha, and there's these 500 pages of tafsir. Like, how does that? What is there exactly to speak about? It's pretty straightforward. I grew up thinking, I know what hamd means. It's some sort of praise, but when you look into it, he's like broken it down. He's compared it with other words in Arabic that give some meaning of praise or gratitude or thanks and so on. So it really is quite deep. I wanted to actually quickly ask you so we'll come to how you found the experience of translating that. But a work like this, which is so rich, especially like volume 1, for example, would you, in your opinion, say you should have some level of understanding in tafsir prior to approaching a text like this, like a translation? Or would you say, you know what, actually anybody can pick this book up and read it, and yeah, maybe you won't get everything in there, but you'll get the gist of things? So what's your opinion on that?
Well, before translating it, you definitely should
Oh yeah,
gain some
definitely.
qualifications.
Yeah,
And I say that like as if it's really obvious, but for some people it's not obvious. I don't know why. Translating a text depends upon understanding that text. If you cannot read it properly, you certainly can't translate it properly. In fact, I would go further. If you would not be able to teach a certain text, then you cannot translate it. I'm talking about books in Islamic ulum.
Yeah.
Right? So who would be able to teach Tafsir al-Razi? You've got to specialize in tafsir. It's not a big introductory text in tafsir by any means.
Yeah.
Imam al-Razi is, of course, an Ash'ari imam. So he has a lot of theological content there. He has got a lot of linguistic content. He has got content that pertains to the Qur'an. He's got content that pertains to philosophy, where he references certain concepts and terms that come from mantiq and falsafa and so on. He is a Shafi'i faqih and usuli. So he's going to draw from those sources. So, the challenge, to be honest, when I was set the challenge of translating it, I realized how enormous a challenge it was. There are other texts that I actually turned down before, not from the same project, but on a different project. I was offered to translate Al-Muntazam, which is a history text by Ibn al-Jawzi. Right. I said, I'm not a historian. I'm not trained in reading history books.
Interesting.
I cannot do it. I won't do it. So I turned it down. Then I was given Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Qur'an of As-Suyuti, and I took that on. Then I did Tafsir al-Razi. So bear in mind that in a way I had to go through the initial hardship and hurdle of translating from Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Qur'an, which is yet to be published, inshallah. Before I felt, you know what, I could take on Tafsir al-Razi. And in order to do that, I had to draw on every resource that I could. It drained my very being. But the fact that I went to Al-Azhar and I studied the type of things that al-Razi is dealing with in his text, and I specialize in the field of tafsir, but of course all the other ulum that I've touched on just earlier that are contained in this tafsir, you have to have a familiarity with them. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll come across certain things and you'll just assume it was a straightforward sentence, and you won't realize, oh, he's touching on something here. In order to get exactly what I say, I'm going to have to go and look at about 7 different books to figure out exactly, even to get the wording right, to read the sentence correctly, and to have the right term. How is this actually discussed? What words are used for this in English? I'm going to have to look at some translations of other works as well, and decide whether I'm want to borrow the same translation, rather than just, okay, I'm going to look in some dictionaries. I'm going to just translate things according to the dictionary. We have a real problem, to be honest, in texts being published like this, that have been translated by people with good intentions, but who were not up for it yet. They were not at the level to handle the text that they've taken. Then take something simple, take a contemporary writer who's writing some reminders and translate that. That should be fine. If you're going to deal with our core texts and our classical a'imma, they're going to be talking in a language which is quite different from the familiar everyday language that you can just sort of solve through dictionaries. And I know this because I work with I work on drafts of translations as well, and I have to deal with the mistakes that translators make. It is a lot of my day is spent on just utter frustration at why did this person think that I meant that? It means something completely different, because they missed the point, because they're not absorbed in that particular and I knew I would have done exactly that mistake if I tried to translate a history book. I would have seen something and I thought it was a word and it was actually somebody's name or the name of their hometown.
I can imagine.
Translate it as if it's a word. So you have to have a familiarity. So with Tafsir al-Razi, to be honest, what happened with me was definitely a growth process. You know, it was a, what they call a learning curve, right? So I started off not very confident. I went through periods of despair, and then came out the other side actually loving this work, and I didn't have a really, to be honest, prior to working on it, I didn't have much of a connection to Tafsir al-Razi or much affection for it. Now, of course, I do, to the extent that I've become known as Imam al-Razi's lawyer on Twitter. But that's because I see a lot of misunderstandings around his tafsir as well. People use it in the way that you said at the beginning about certain ayahs are misquoted and so on. With Tafsir al-Razi, for some reason, every individual or sect wants to quote al-Razi as agreeing with them.
They want to claim him.
Or, you know, basically suggesting that he's, you know, that they can find a precedent for their strange views in Tafsir al-Razi. And oftentimes it's just based on a complete misreading or misquoting.
How long did it take you then? Like dedicating yourself to this project?
2 years working pretty much full time.
2 years. Wow. Okay.
It was sort of spread over a couple of different periods of time. But yeah, I was working full pelt on it for what amounts to 2 years.
Wow. And, you know, going back to what you said about you've come across some really odd kind of translations, without name dropping or calling, like, is there any examples that you can give of some like translations gone horribly wrong, whether it's Qur'an or anything else off the top of your head?
I mean, the good thing is I'm now in a position where I can catch these things before they get published.
Okay.
And the thing is that it makes me very worried about what has been published, to the extent that I actually don't like to look inside those books, because I like to just maintain a positive view or a neutral view. I don't go out looking for mistakes or in order to expose anybody or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
I think that if we are in a situation where translations are needed in our community, then, you know, people are going to use them. But what I do is I draw attention of my students, who I'm trying to nurture this critical eye in translation. I try to get them to be very cognizant of the types of errors that happen, so that they don't make those errors. You know, otherwise there's no point just telling everybody, "Oh, this translation is rubbish, that translation is rubbish." Well, make another one then, so that they can use it. Otherwise, why trash, you know, the work that exists?
Yeah.
But in tafsir, we don't have very much available at the current time. What's available is, you know, just a few works that are translated in full, and then you have some more that are translated in part, and people are going to use those, right? There's no point kind of whinging about the translations. There can always be room for improvement, including in Tafsir al-Razi, no doubt. But, you know, I think if somebody doesn't like my translation, there's probably still better things they could spend the time on rather than retranslating.
Okay, so you know, like, so we've pretty much established, and you've mentioned already, you kind of alluded to the fact that it's not enough to know Arabic to be able to translate the Qur'an into whichever language. It's not enough to just master the Arabic language. It's not enough to just refer to dictionaries. There's more to it. So what would you say is, if we were to like say, okay, what's a beginner's guide to, without going into detail, you know, time does not permit, but without going into detail, what's like a beginner's guide to being able to produce a good translation of the Qur'an? What's some of the basic things, or maybe not basic, but what's some of the things that you need?
There's no need for beginners to produce a translation of the Qur'an.
True, yeah.
Like, so we have dozens and dozens of translations, and those who have done the translation vary from you know, scholars who are well established in tafsir, to people who really, frankly, you got to say, why did you do this? Why did you bother? I mean, even if you did it as a hobby, why did you publish it? You know, did you not have some, you know, some shame, really, to be honest, to put some of these because so
Yeah.
many translations of Quran get published. It's really crazy. Really crazy. But it adds to a kind of richness. Okay, I'm going to get into this before you get a chance to ask it. So I get
Go on.
asked, of course, very frequently, what is the best translation of the Quran?
Yeah, we're going to come to that definitely.
And the thing is that it's not. There's never going to be really because of the way that I work with Quran translations. I can't really even begin to answer that question. What is the best translation of the whole Quran? Because I would look at it ayah by ayah, right? So if I'm looking at a particular verse and I'll think about the meanings that have been discussed by the Mufassirin, and then I look at the translations and I'll use a website like islamawakened.com. It's got a very long list of translations.
Yeah.
And I look through and I scan through the translations and I see, okay, I see what this person was thinking and I see what that person was thinking. Interesting word choice. Okay. I'll look at it, through them as a whole, and I will sometimes say, oh, I like what that person did, or this is terrible. Oh my God, what did this person not understand anything? And sometimes the person that I'm saying didn't understand anything is the best for another ayah. Sometimes the person didn't understand anything is actually like one of the most popular translations. It could be one of the best translations. And like I say, I don't go out there to trash anything. I'm just saying that, as a critical reader myself and person in the field of Quran translation, that's what I deal with. So it would be more like, what's the best translation of this ayah? And then I wouldn't even have like just one. I might say, okay, these are some of the ones that I think really did a good job of that ayah. And these are some that didn't do a good job of the ayah, but then the list might be reversed for another ayah. So that's why I cannot say that what is best for a person, which is the best choice to go and buy.
Yeah.
To be honest, you're very free to choose, and then the reason that you choose something might be for reasons other than accuracy, rather than just the question of accuracy, right?
Yeah.
So what do you find flows well for you? So some people say, oh, I really don't like the old-fashioned kind of English, thee and thou and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, the thee and thou gets a lot of hate for is it so hard to learn a couple of these and thous? It's easier than learning the whole of Arabic. So people hate on it, but okay, fine. You get updated versions of the same translations as well. The Yusuf Ali translation, some people have stripped out the these and thous, replaced it with you and you. Okay, so some of them are more literary, flowery, and some of them are more sort of have a more technical feel, terse expressions. Some of them have got more brackets than others. Some people really dislike brackets. Some people, recognize that, okay, the translator is trying to fill in some gaps in your understanding, but sometimes the translator is doing more than that and trying to impose something that is from outside the text. So to be honest, it's a complex question. Normally I would just say to someone like, what do you have? What have you been reading? And if you like that, carry on. You don't have to adopt the one translation that I tell you is the best translation. And then people push and they push and they push, and then I say, okay, Abdul Halim. I say Professor Abdul Halim because he's my Ustadh. But that doesn't actually mean that I think Professor Abdul Halim's is the best in all ways and all ayahs, right?
Yeah.
With all respect to him, nobody has that title or that crown to be best in all ways. So anyway, this is what a person needs to do is to appreciate translations. And I want to say that there is a tendency to talk about reading translations as if it's purely according to necessity, like, oh, what a shame, you have to read translations. Oh, if only you could read the Arabic. It's not as bad as that. It's not as bleak as that, because translations are, at the end of the day, a kind of tafsir of the ayah. It's a short tafsir that pertains to the words of the ayah more than it pertains to any other aspect of it, right? It's the words of the ayah are being explained. Instead of explaining it in the same language, so Arabic to Arabic, it's explaining it in a different language, say English, right? So when you read a translation, you're reading a tafsir. A lot of Arabs, by the way, do not read tafsir, not even a simple tafsir. And it just doesn't occur to a lot of people who are brought up speaking Arabic, of whatever description of Arabic we're talking about here. It doesn't occur to them that they actually need something like that to understand the Quran correctly. So they make some mistakes in reading certain ayahs, and they don't know that they're making a mistake because they just assumed it was right. And I've come across some examples of that with my own friends. I asked my friend who's of Egyptian background, I said, what do you understand from فَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ وَعِيدٍ? The end of Surah Qaf, it should say, should be understood as, and remind with the Quran, whoever fears my warning. Man yakhafu wa'id. And wa'id is sort of shortened from wa'idi. There's a kasra there, but the ya is not there, right? فَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ وَعِيدٍ. I asked him, what do you understand from that? He said, and remind using the Quran, and repeat. Like rinse and repeat. Okay. So he thought wa'id means wa'id.
Right?
So,
okay.
Because maybe in Egyptian dialect it's sort of close to
Eid.
Like we have Eid every year, right? So the point is that it never would have occurred to him that was wrong, but someone who reads the translation would never have got that misconception, right? Other things can happen from translations, I grant you, but the basic meaning will always be there. So even someone who is a native speaker of Arabic probably should read a translation or a tafsir in Arabic if that's what you if you're ready to do that, then absolutely, that's fine. But you should read something that explains to you the basic meanings. And then, of course, to learn Arabic, in order to get past an absolute dependence on the translation. For me, that was how I started out in learning Arabic, was just through sort of, before having classes and so on, I would read the translation of Quran along with the Arabic of the Quran. Sometimes I would do it like I would listen to the audio recitation of the Quran, and I would scan with my eyes the translation. And I would start to notice, oh, that's what that word means. Oh, that's what that word means. And it would just subconsciously go into my brain. And then I would start to notice, kum, whenever you have kum on the end of something, it's like you all, okay. And then na is like we or us. So you start to notice the pattern before anyone has to teach you all the pronouns.
Interesting.
You notice how, you got masjid here and masajid there. The translation is mosque and mosques. So I understand that the plural of masjid is masajid. Just to give you a kind of example, I don't know if it's a real one for me, but reading the Quran with translation is a great first step to build up some vocabulary and a basic idea of the patterns that form from the grammar of Quranic Arabic. And then, of course, attending classes and studying and pushing yourself forward so that you can understand the Quran without the translation. But that, that's so that you can go further. And then maybe for your own self, like, to read an ayah and say, okay, this is what I think it would mean. And then you check that against the translation or against the tafsir. That way you're actually you're checking how well you're doing in your process of learning.
Yeah, the method that you mentioned is actually really good. It's something that that even I've tried to implement in some basic classes. People, nothing to do with the Arabic language, but just reciting the Quran and at the same time getting the students to follow a translation. And funnily enough, we actually just follow Abdul Halim's one because it's just easy and nice, free-flowing text for everyone to follow. And then they end up picking up, like you said, you end up picking up words, or it's a more reflective kind of way of reading where you're listening to the Quran and you're able to pick up some things as well and see the English rather than me reading the verse and then saying, okay, here's a translation. It's quite an effective way. And you also answered a question that I was going to ask, which was, you kind of already answered it, which was, is a translation really a translation, or do you consider it to be more of an interpretation? And you kind of answered that.
It is a translation. That's the thing. Like, I don't know why people are so. I do know because I read into the subject, but it frustrates me no end. Why not just say it's a translation? You don't have to say it's the translation of the meanings. Is there some other kind of translation? I'm a translator. I translate through the medium of meanings. There's no other type of translation. I'm sorry to say. Whoever told you that there's two types of translation, literal translation and meaning translation. This doesn't make any sense. Whenever you translate something, you have to determine what's the meaning of that and how do I express that meaning in the other language. So that's a translation. There is no perfect translation of the Quran. There never can be. Quite honestly, though, there is no perfect translation of anything, and there never can be, right? But yes, the Quran is, particular level of challenge due to the beauty of its language, the perfection of its language, but also the high responsibility of conveying divine speech in a different language. You're never going to be able to carry everything, because everything is significant. In the Arabic Quran, everything is significant, including the Arabic word that was used as opposed to another Arabic word. So it has a significance which makes it particularly impossible to translate perfectly, right?
Yeah.
Not impossible to translate. So there are translations of the Quran. We don't have to call them translations of the meaning of the Quran. Don't be so tedious about it.
Yeah.
Translations of the Quran exist, but they are interpretations. Of course, they're interpretations, and they depend upon interpretations, because how an ayah is translated should depend upon what the translator has understood from the mufassirin. So either the translator has to say, well, I'm a mufassir and I'm going to translate the Quran being a mufassir.
Yeah.
Or they have to say, as a translator, I depend upon mufassirin. Or they are saying, I don't care. The Quran has no rights. Anyone can just... If you say that, then I will throw your work out. But if you show me that you are dealing with mufassirin, or you are yourself qualified enough to be considered even a minor mufassir, then your work is worthy of being engaged with.
Fair enough. To summarize this discussion, this bit on translation of the Quran, just in summary, then what would you say? Because the question that's posed to you, said it's not really fair. What's the best translation out there? Give me one that covers everything. So what would you say then? Fine. What generally makes a good translation of the Quran? In summary,
what makes a good translation is a whole host of factors. So first of all, like I said, any translation, you have to understand the text correctly. When I say correctly, there are often multiple possibilities in understanding the Quranic ayah. That's why we have a whole tafsir tradition. That's why we have lengthy discussions around many ayat. Some ayat are very straightforward with one meaning, and that's really it. Some of them have multiple meanings that are, some of them stronger than others. And some have several interpretations that are considered sort of equally strong by the Mufassirin, who try to weigh the opinions. And they say, look, we can't really resolve what is the understanding. Therefore, we could say, for example, that all of these meanings are actually intended. But when they say all of these, I'll give you an example. Let's say in Surah Al-Qari'ah, right? وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. Two words, right? Fa, you can say a separate word. So, ummuhu, his is hawiyah. That much we've got. That everyone can agree on. But what is the and what is hawiyah? There are three opinions, which some of the Mufassirin have said there are three strong opinions, and there's no reason to discard one or prefer one absolutely, right? So they said, whoever's scale is light, scale of good deeds is light. So then what's his fate? فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. His mother is bereft, is destroyed. Hawiyah means halika, right? So it's an expression for a person being destroyed, that he's not just he's destroyed, his mother is destroyed, right? So it's an Arabic expression. They often said things in terms of mother and father to emphasize the condition of a person, right? So he's so destroyed that his mother is destroyed. Or another way of looking at it is, because he is in such a state, then his mother will be bereft of him and she'll be destroyed with grief over what happens to him. فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. That's one of the interpretation, and probably one that you've never heard before, because I don't think that any of the translations even touch that one, right?
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, they probably deal with the other two. But in fact, I think they only take one. I'll deal with that one last. Okay, so the second interpretation for ummuhu hawiyah, the can be ras, which is the crown of the head, right? So the top of the skull. And hawiyah simply means falling. Hawa is to fall. When najmi idha hawa, by the star when it falls. So he will fall headlong into the fire. Simple as that, right? فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. If I recall from what I've seen, I don't think any of the translators touch that one as well. Maybe some do, but it's also not a very difficult. The first one is maybe more difficult to read into, but is actually most obviously means mother, right? So then the third meaning, which I think translations all gravitate towards, or pretty much, is that his his mother, but meaning his destination and his abode, will be Hawiyah, which is the name of a pit
Yeah.
in the hellfire, right? So Hawiyah, they take as like a proper noun.
Mm.
So his home will be Hawiyah. But doesn't easily mean home, but in
Yeah.
the sense that it will embrace him like a mother, and it will be his only mother now. He'll have no mother
Mm.
except the punishment and the Hawiyah.
Mm.
So what I'm getting at is, well, why did I get here? What makes a good translation? First of all, that the translator should have read the tafsirs and then decided which one to go with,
Yeah.
rather than just, for example, gone with the most obvious or just copied all the other translators. But they should be confident enough to say, I understood it in this way, based on what the Mufassirin have discussed around it. Then, of course, you want, as well as the accuracy and so on, is to be readable. For the most part, the translators done by native speakers of English, who are kind of few and far between, have a higher chance of doing well in this department, right?
Yeah.
Professor Abdul Halim used, not used in a bad way, but like he got the assistance of native speakers to read his translation and give him feedback on how it was reading, and he improved it through that process before it was published, and then he's continued to update it since then. So he speaks like a native speaker anyway. But there are some people, honestly, who translated the Quran. You're like, why did you do this? Who asked you, really? As English speakers, we didn't need someone who barely speaks English to translate the Quran for us. Honestly speaking, we have a lot going on already over here. Don't bother if you're not. So I'm working just now with Ustadh Nu'man, who you mentioned before, Bayina Institute. I'm working with him on a new translation of the Quran. And when we started out, my feeling was, do we need another translation of the Quran? I didn't have that feeling. When we started doing it, I realized that, there is definitely room for there's definitely room for this translation. Okay, because we are dealing with it on a certain level, in certain ways and approaches, which I feel is definitely adding something. Not then, what it won't do is say replace all the other translations and become the sole best translation. I hope it will be the best, because that's the thing. Like, just by nature of subjectivity, if you ask me what's the best translation, it will be my translation. It will be my translation, or I will copy someone's translation that, if I was copying, I will quote to your translation that I feel expresses the meaning best in English, and then it would become the way I translate it as well. So if you ask me, I will give you that subjective answer. It's not because I'm better at it than anyone else. That's not the point. It's just that my best, subjectively speaking, is what I find to be best, and then I'll tell you that translation. So this is going to take a while. We did some of Surah Al-Baqarah already. In fact, how we've been working Surah Yusuf and continuing on that at the current time. But what's proven to be really important is making it into contemporary English. And I don't mean like using stupid modern expressions in order just for the sake of sounding hip and fresh. The point, when I say contemporary English, because I'm saying that's another reason that a translation cannot be the best, forever and ever. Amen. Because you're translating in a moment in time, and then in 50 years' time, the language that you used will be outdated and old. So we're translating now in 2020. May Allah hasten our passage in 2021. And may it be better for us and give us all the khair and barakah. So, and relief. So the thing is that that's the other reason why we feel that we're doing something in the present time which will expire, and there'll be a need for other people
to
come and do a better job in their time. What I hope that we do is actually set a lot of the standards that can improve the standard of Quran translation going forward, because it seems like just about every year a new translation is being published. Sometimes more than one per year is being published in English. And we don't need a lot more quantity. But there are certain things with regards to quality that do need a marked step forward. So we take that upon ourselves. We try our best to do something that will be appreciated for what it is.
Yeah.
And you know, and then we'll see how the market judges it, and then we just really we hope for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that action.
Yeah, inshallah. No, that's something definitely to look forward to. I was gonna quickly ask about, because we've spoken a lot about Qur'an translations, and we've said there's a lot out there. There's a lot that you can access in English, and you did also touch on the fact that in terms of actual tafsir works, like you translated volume 1 of Imam Razi's work, there's not really much out there. Perhaps I think Ibn Kathir was like a really, like, that was done quite a while back, wasn't it? So that's quite widely available. I've never personally had a look at the English translation of it, and I think like Ma'arif al-Quran is a very popular one. A lot of people refer to that. That's like Urdu and Arabic, and then now English. And I think Qurtubi, some of it's out, and
Partially,
it's
yeah.
in the works. Yeah, partially it's out. So like, why do you think there's not much more? Do you think we need more tafsir works being translated
We
for
need
people to
more.
access? Yeah.
We need more, but we need qualified people to do it.
Okay.
Like I said before, if you can't do it, just don't do it. Nobody's forcing you. La ikraha fi din. Okay. So, and
Yeah.
also in Tarjama, there's no compulsion. Okay. Don't feel compelled to translate something because we need it. We don't need bad translations. That's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
I'm trying to, you know, lead a team of people. You know, you don't have to do it with me. You can do it. You don't have to, but if you want to, I want to bring people on board who can do things, right? So at the moment, okay, just to mention what we've got out there, right? Ibn Kathir is out there, but all abridged versions of the tafsir, which, you know, maybe it should be abridged anyway in English, right? But that's how it is. Ma'arif al-Quran is a full translation, as far as I understand, from Urdu. And then you've got very recently Tafsir al-Sa'di from Arabic has been translated to English. What other full tafsirs? In terms of partial tafsirs, you have got. Okay, so in addition to that, of course, we've got Tafhim al-Quran of Maududi. We've got In the Shade of the Quran.
Yeah.
Said Qutb. And these things, sometimes people, you know, they kind of hate on them and say, well, they're not mufassirin, etc. I'll tell you what, people in the field of tafsir appreciate these works, you know, appreciate them for what they are. They're a bit different from standard tafsirs, sure.
Yeah.
Don't call it tafsir if you don't want, that's fine. But a lot of what they said is like very, very powerful and useful to appreciate the message of the Quran for modern times. You know, they're already a bit outdated. Let's be honest, right? Because they were written in the 60s, whatever, right? Or before that. So, and they have their context, right? And so you know, people draw attention to, you know, some of the turmoil that surrounded the writing of In the Shade of the Quran, right? But the point is that also the translators have taken those kind of things into account. Dr. Salahi is a very competent, very respected translator who worked on In the Shade. So anyway, what I'm saying is don't depreciate these works, whether you want to call them tafsir or you want to sniff at the word tafsir, that's fine, but they are useful works. In addition to that, we've got partial tafsir. So Tafsir Razi is partially translated and is continuing a bit. Al-Qurtubi seems to be a project that's intended to be in full. Baydawi by G.F. Haddad, he's released one volume. He's planning to release the full translation. You've got At-Tabari, you've got parts of At-Tabari translated as well. You know, I've got a more complete list somewhere, but this is just to mention some of them.
Some of them, yeah.
So the fact is, it's hard, and if it's going to be done, it has to be done properly. Tafsir of Ibn Juzay, inshallah, the Tafsir of Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi will be coming out in full in a couple of years, and I'm working on that just now.
Inshallah.
So the translation was already done in a draft format by Aisha Bewley, Hafidhahullah, and I'm reworking that translation. It's going to be published before long, and I think that will be something that really adds to what is available out there in terms of full tafsirs, classical tafsirs. And that's in terms of classical works, and what we need going forward will be something else other than translations. But you know, so people sometimes say to me as well, like, oh, why do you start work on writing a new commentary? And the thing is, how do you get to place where you're where you're allowed to do that. I
Yeah.
think that for me, it's a lot about trying to do khidmah to the mufassirin, and I have a lot of other khidmas planned,
Mm.
including to the tafsir of Ibn Ashur, rahimahullah,
Yeah.
to work on a kind of translation of that work. Before I turn fully, head and beard going white,
Yeah.
and then maybe I will say something myself, inshallah.
Inshallah. So that sounds good. So it sounds like the it's quite exciting what the future holds in terms of there seems to be a lot more a lot more work, a lot more things in the works, inshallah, coming fairly soon. And I think that's definitely great. Let's end off just on a quick practical note, Sheikh. Just in terms of anybody who's interested, I'm not saying interested in going out there and quickly getting something published and out there, but someone interested in translating the Quran. They have a keen kind of interest in that. What last kind of tips can you give to them to kind of slowly begin that journey in Quran translation?
Well, again, it's a case. It's not a case of thinking about the output. Think about the input. So what? I don't know why someone would feel okay. I want to work on. I want to do a Quran translation. What is it that they see is the gap or the problem that needs to be solved by another translation? That needs to be clear first. So it's about how do I actually understand the Quran myself. That is the reason that I went to study what I studied and just to focus on Quranic studies in particular at Al Azhar. If I could, I would have just gone there purely to learn for myself, and that would be it. But you can't really get away with that, especially when people are sort of have an expectation you're going to come back and obviously contribute something and do something, which I'm happy to do. But in the first place, I went to study because I wanted to know. And I'm still doing what I do because I want to know. So everything I do that involves an output is combined with an input. And I choose the projects that I do according to what I feel is useful for me. Professor Jonathan Brown, who, mashallah, he wrote a small blurb on this, the Great Exegesis. When I told him early on that I was doing this, he said something very smart, as he tends to do. He said, "Oh, Tafsir al-Razi, you're translating that. That's going to make you a beast." And the thing is, what I appreciate about, this is majaz, of course, this is metaphorical. Not dabbatan min al-ard. So the idea was, he understood that by doing it, I would become a beast, right? Not that okay, to some extent, you have to have some beastness with it. Beast, what's the word? Don't say it. You have to have some beastness inside you to do it.
Yeah.
But no doubt, I grew a great deal by doing it. It expanded my mind, alhamdulillah, to whatever it's not. It still needs a lot more expanding, but from what it was, right? So I still choose projects on that basis, right? So what I do is like, is this going to allow me to grow? Is this going to allow me to learn, while being sure that I'm also giving something that could be a benefit to others and is good enough, right, that I can justify doing it and publishing it and putting it out there. So that is still, so I accepted the Tafsir ibn Juzay project because I thought, well, I want to learn about how a mukhtasar, a concise commentary, how does that work? I want to I want to go Maliki after going Shafi'i with and I'm Hanafi, by the way, so this is all expanding out here and there. So is there something that I can benefit from doing it? I took the opportunity because I thought, okay, while translating or working the translation or editing the translation of Tafsir ibn Juzay, I will also go through this as a course with a group of students so that I can share with them some insights about reading tafsir and translating tafsir, and also how to assess a translation that's been already done and how to learn from things that go right and wrong in the process of translation. So that's what I would say, like, be self-centered in this regard. The world is not desperate necessarily for your output, right? First, build yourself up to be the person who gets what you need, your own curiosity satisfied, and it should never be satisfied, right? You should be like that son of Adam who's mentioned in the hadith, when he said, the Prophet ﷺ said that if the son of Adam was given a valley full of gold, he would wish for a second valley. You should be like that with ma'rifah, with knowledge, right? Anything that you get, you get the information that you were after, or the answer you were after. You should just have more questions, right? And you should go keep going and finding out. That's how it should be with the Quran. We're not going to get the final answers just handed to us like that, right?
Yeah.
And if we have the benefit of reading the great insights of the Mufassirin, and they're giving us answers on a plate, we should use that in order to motivate ourselves to the next questions that we can ask, right? Because that's how our investigation, our exploration of the Quran should be, appreciating what it is. It's guidance for all times. It's guidance for all things and situations. So I would say that focus on the Arabic language. Put a great deal of effort in Arabic language. Do not rush. Persevere in the Arabic language. If your Arabic language is not a given priority at this early stage, nothing can be built upon it. Certainly not translation of the Quran. I've seen people who translated the Quran recently, who translated certain words based on what it appeared to them to mean. Again, maybe like certain Arabic native speakers, but not native Fusha speakers, you understand, where they read something sort of in an Egyptian way. I don't mean to hate on any country, but it just so happens. You read a word in an Egyptian way, it means something different. Like they misunderstood, and they wrote that in a translation, and they published that translation. Don't rush. Don't rush. Right? So the Arabic language has to be solid. And then, of course, there are all the different ulum that are connected to tafsir. Ulum of the Quran, the ulum of the tafsir of the Quran, what the Mufassirin have said. And then all the things that are connected to that in some way, you need to have an appreciation of. But yeah, translation is something which we need more of. I want to encourage more people to do it, but I want to encourage you to get strong, before attempting it. I mean, beyond attempting it like as a hobby, do it as a hobby. But before attempting to publish things in translation, please, we need to raise the game. Really, we just don't need more translations of Islamic texts and so on that are, half baked. Right? We need thorough work, scholarship. If you do something as a kind of hobby, make sure it goes to somebody who is, is suitably in a position to assess that translation, check it, correct it before putting it out there into the world.
Yeah, I really like your point about the whole input versus output. Very, very valuable advice. Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Sohaib. That is all we have time for today. If you don't mind just holding up, because you've got closer access to it, holding up your book again, volume 1 of Tafsir Razi. Where can we get hold of this, by the way, just for everyone else watching?
You can find it from Amazon or ethical resellers, or from the publisher itself.
Excellent. And you mentioned this new volume that you're working on with Surah Yusuf and other chapters. When can we expect to see that?
In about 2022, because there's still some work to be done on it, and then it has to go through the process with the publisher.
Yeah.
But around 2022, bi'idhnillah.
Inshallah. Hopefully better times by then. Hopefully much, much better. But thank you so much, Sheikh, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed our discussions today. And for our viewers and listeners, hope you benefited from today's discussion. Don't forget to check out Sheikh Sohaib's work and keep an eye out for those upcoming publications. Don't forget to keep an eye out for upcoming podcasts as well from Feed. Subscribe to our channel, keep up to date, and we will hopefully see you very, very soon with another episode of the Feed podcast. From myself, Shabbir, from Sheikh Sohaib Saeed, we bid you farewell until next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.